All right, so thank you guys for coming out. What we're going to talk about today is current events and politics. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to talk about stretching. Stretching to stay young. So this is a topic that I feel like I've been thinking about constantly. If you haven't noticed, we don't work with a bunch of 20-somethings, which is the way I like it. And but stretching is like just more and more common. Like it's important. And a lot of it, it's not really, in my eyes. It's really not about the stretching. It's about improving how well you move, because that's what's going to transfer over to improving everyday life. Whether that means being able to have the mobility to squat down and pick a box up, or pick a bag of dog food up, or whether that's like being able to go back further on your backswing so you can drive a golf ball further. Whatever the case may be, stretching to me, I look at it as it's all about how do we improve this person's quality of life so that they can do the things that they want to do, relatively pain-free, and be able to do them and move well. The reason this is so important is because the body is much smarter than any of us, and if we don't have the range of motion to get in a certain position, like the body will figure it out through the least path of resistance, which is oftentimes not what we really want, because that's what leads to a lot of injuries. So that's not always a good thing. So again, we're looking at, I look at stretching as like, how can this improve this person's quality of life? And so that's kind of where the lens this is coming from. So what we're going to talk about today, just kind of like 3 quick myths around stretching, just things that, there's a lot of information, like with everything exercise, pretty much any topic now that you can read online. And there's a lot of information about stretching that I would say is just missing context. It's like, it's not completely wrong, but it's also not completely right. And a lot of times, like I said, there's just, it's taking a lot of information is given without any context. So there's a lot of like half-truths about that. So we're going to talk about that, and then talk about 3 different types of stretching. And like how we categorize them and like the buckets that we put everything in. Because as far as like having systems in place, I'm all about like everything needs to have a place to live. Like everything's got to fit into a category or a bucket. There's got to be a structure or a system there. And then we're going to get out and do some stuff hands-on, nothing crazy, not everybody sweat, but just to kind of like run through what are those different types of stretches, how does it work, like just to give you some ideas so you can put it into practice. I'll also email you tomorrow a list of kind of the 1-page cliff notes of this, along with either like 14 or 16 different example stretches that are broken down by category, so you can go, okay, this is what we were talking about, these kinds of stretches. So broken down by category. So if you want to know some even more specific examples, you'll have them organized by upper body, lower body, and like I said, by the 3 different types of stretching. So as far as like stretching myths go, or things that are really misunderstood, the first one is, a lot of times people will come in and they'll say like, hey, I want to work on my stretching, I want to get like longer and lean muscles. That's kind of a marketing hook in the fitness world a little bit. It's this idea that like you can stretch, or you can do certain exercises to get longer muscles in, and that's just simply not true, because the muscle is attached here. So if you think about it, it's like you can't really lengthen a muscle. It's attached via tendon to the bone, like where it's attached, unless you want to surgically, cut the muscle and reattach it. So, it's just kind of a quick thing to clear up this idea that like, are there certain stretches I can do to get longer muscles? The answer is just, unfortunately, no, unless you want to go the surgery route, which I wouldn't advise. But that's just kind of a misunderstanding, and that will come in, and that will be important here in just a minute when we talk about like how do you get more flexible or increase your range of motion. So the second one is this idea of I need to improve my flexibility, and so I just need to like stretch. I need to like spend hours and hours stretching, and that's another thing that I would argue is not very accurate. If you look at a lot of the modern research on stretching, you're actually going to have a lot more bang for your buck and a lot more permanent improvements if you were to spend, let's just say, 10 minutes a day every day than if you did like one 70-minute stretching session a week. whether it be like stretching in class or something else. A lot of people say, hey, I've been going to this class like every weekend and like working on my flexibility. It doesn't seem like, it's helping me a ton. And the reason is because all things created equal, the frequency is going to be a lot more important than duration. So it's going to be a lot more effective to spend a little bit of time stretching more often than spending a lot of time stretching less frequently. So just something to wrap your head around, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what we know. What matters is what we actually will do and implement. And again, you can be a lot more successful stretching less for more often. So, and then the last kind of thing that's often misunderstanding, and a lot of people use these words interchangeably. I do as well, just because it's what people understand. It's this idea of like mobility versus flexibility. And so most people say, hey, I want to get more flexible. Most people, what they actually mean, I want to get more mobile. And the difference comes down to how the muscles are working and it being more active versus passive. So when we think about flexibility, and Kelly, you in there?
Yep.
So when we think about, perfect time. When we think about, go ahead and lay down or wherever, it doesn't matter. So when we think about Kelly bringing one leg up, this is her mobility. She can bring her leg this far. Now, I can take her leg further. This is her flexibility, that last little bit that I can bring her leg up further. So what I mean by that is her mobility is the range of motion she can control, all right? The flexibility is what? She can't really, she doesn't have the strength to put her body in those, her body can get in that position, but she can't do that. It either has to be assisted by using like a box or having someone, again, like she can control that, but this would be her flexibility, this last little bit where, thank you, where, we'll call you when we need you. We'll have to do the other side next time, so she's not lopsided. So that's the idea. Again, there's a big misunderstanding, like this idea of flexibility versus mobility. Most people think they want to be more flexible, but in reality, you want to improve your mobility. And the reason that that's important is because, again, this is something that you want to have the strength to be able to control, because that's what's going to help you, like in everyday life, for instance, whether it's like on the golf course or playing pickleball or picking up a bag in the garage, or whatever the case may be. So again, we want to think about increasing our mobility, not as much flexibility, because our flexibility in a lot of ways doesn't really help us in like everyday life. So again, just to that kind of I like to cover those three things because that kind of segues into when we're looking at our three different types of stretching, and these are in no ways the scientific terms, but this is what works for simple minds like myself. It boils down to stretching falls into one of three categories: passive, active, and isometric. Right? Passive was if I was to bring Kelly's leg up and hold it in a spot, she didn't do anything. It's just I put her in that position. That would be passive. Her muscles are not actively working to get her there. That is passive stretching. Another good example of passive stretching would be just like me putting my foot up here and just like coming forward and stretch, like the muscles being stretched, but I'm not really like, there's no movement. So it's just sitting here and holding it at like in a particular spot. So passive stretching, again, would be like the muscles aren't really firing, they're not really moving. And again, it's just like getting to a position and holding it. So type 2 would be our active stretching, right? This would be like a lot of the stuff that we do in our warm-up here. For instance, like when we have people do like the wall slides up against the wall. That's active. I'm moving, my muscles are firing, they're moving. That's good because not only does it help to warm up the joints better, but an added benefit to that is, again, we're working on our mobility. We're maintaining the strength to control ourselves through those positions. So again, doing like a wall slide here, or if I'm like doing one of these where I'm kicking forward like we do in our warm-up, that would be something more active. Right? And I'm not saying passive stretching is bad. There's a place for all of it. But we first need to understand kind of like the framework of the three different categories so you know like where to use it. So again, active stretching would be more with movement. All right? And that's where, like I said, your muscles are involved in what's going on. So the third type of stretching is what we call isometric stretching. Now, when you're looking at the three different types of stretching, isometric stretching is probably, in my opinion, the least utilized, yet when it comes to making permanent changes in your range of motion and how your body moves, it's the most effective. So it's the least utilized, but yet the most effective. Why is that? In my opinion, it just boils down to like a lack of education, and like we still do a lot of things because that's the way they were done in the 80s and 90s, and like, we haven't really evolved in some ways. But I think, like I said, the isometric stretching is the most important as far as making permanent changes. And what that entails would be like put my leg up here. Now this muscle is in a stretched position. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive my heel down into the ground. And we're going to do this one here in 5 minutes so you can kind of get a feel for what we're talking about here. So I'm stretching this muscle. Now I'm driving my leg down. When I drive that leg down, these muscles are firing isometrically. All right, so I stretch the muscle, and if you think about your muscle fibers, it's almost just like a bunch of rubber bands. All right, and they're just constantly, as we move, they're constantly contracting and lengthening and shortening. And it's going on all day when we're moving. So what we're doing here is I'm stretching the muscles out, and so I'm putting them at their end range of motion. And then I'm isometrically contracting those muscles from that lengthened position. Now the reason that that's important is, and this goes back to this idea of like, you know, I stretch all the time and my muscles aren't any longer, my flexibility's not getting any better. And the reason that is because your flexibility or mobility, whichever term you want to use, your range of motion, it's not really about how long your muscles are. It's your body is, again, your body's very intelligent. It's a defense mechanism within the body so that you don't hurt yourself. If you think about like, if you're watching the Olympics and you see guys like pull up during a sprint because they pulled a hamstring or tore their hamstring muscle, all those injuries, not all, but most of those injuries occur at their end range of motion. It's kind of, if you think about your muscle fibers being stretched, like I said, like a bunch of rubber bands, it's kind of like a bell curve. At the middle of the bell curve, the muscles are the strongest. At the end range of motion, at the end of the bell curve, that's when they're weakest. It's the same principle as in like, I'm grabbing a big weight over here and curling it up. At the midpoint, I'm strongest. So at the end range of motion, I'm the weakest, and at the end range here, I'm weakest. And so that's where people tend to get hurt, is on that bell curve as far as how you're stretching. They get hurt at the end. Again, a sprinter that pulls a hamstring, it tends to happen either like at the top of the stride or at the very end of the stride when he's like his hips fully extended. So it's because that's the weakest point throughout the movement. So we want to use isometric stretches because one, is going to help prevent injury, but then two, it teaches the body that our body won't let us get in certain positions because it's saying like, hey, these muscles are really tight here, or Patty doesn't have the strength to be here, so I don't want her to be able to move her arm back far enough because she's going to get hurt. So what happens is we put ourselves in that position and then contract the muscles isometrically, and then we get stronger not only at that point, but we get stronger at plus or minus 10 degrees. So what happens is, by doing that isometric stretching, not only I'm getting stronger at that end range of motion, which then tells my body, hey, I have the strength to be in this position comfortably and I'm not going to get hurt. So then our muscles relax and like let us go there. And so again, it all boils down to like, it's helping to trick the body. It is getting the muscle stronger, but it's also helping to convince or trick the body that's like, hey, he's okay or she's okay in this position, and we can let her go there. Again, because if you think about it, it's like our muscles don't really tighten, they don't change shape like once we stop growing. So, but we tend to get less flexible as we get older. And it's not because, again, it's not because like our bones are shrinking or weight. It's not because anything's changing. It's just the fact that it's our body protecting us from ourselves. So it has nothing to do with, like, it's not like the muscles are getting tighter or longer or shorter. It's just our body protecting us because we're getting weaker because we're not incorporating this stuff. So again, those are the 3 different types of stretching, and we're going to go into those here in just a minute. So when we think about stretching and applying what we're getting ready to do, you know, I'm always looking at it like, okay, how can we get the most out of this in the least amount of time? All about getting, you know, let's take the easy road here. So, and do as little as we have to. So how when we're looking at stretching and like, okay, well, I've only got 5 minutes, what should I do? I've only got 10 minutes, what should I do? You want to think about, from your stretching, like, focus on the hips and the shoulders. Because if you think about like those 2 areas or those 2 muscle groups, that all human movement, it pretty much involves the shoulders and the hips. Whether it's, again, golf swing, you know, tennis racket, or just moving down to squatting down to pick a box up, it's all hips and shoulders. So if you just focus your stretching on those 2 areas, if you're someone like myself that absolutely despises stretching, wants nothing to do with it, but knows you need to do it, I would say, all right, we'll just focus on those 2 areas and you'll be good. Like I said, it's kind of 80-20 principle. You'll get 80% of the results with just focusing on, you know, those 2 areas in particular. So, so again, we've got, when it comes to prioritizing, think shoulders, which we're going to do, and think hips. The reason, not only are they involved in all human movement, but if you think about, like, you know, the whole sitting is the new smoking, we all sit too much. But what happens when we sit, think about your hips, all of a sudden they're in a shortened position here. My hamstrings are in a shortened position. If I want to stretch my hamstrings out, I've got to straighten my leg. How many people sit like this? Not many. So we all sit too much, and when we do, these muscles are shortened. Jim does, but the rest of us don't. So, you know, we all sit like with our legs hip here, and these muscles are shortened, these muscles are shortened, and then we're hunched forward. So these are like we're in like the worst position possible from a posture standpoint. So, but this is how most of us spend, whether it's like texting, driving, eating, working on a computer. We all spend too much time like hunched over. And so again, that's why those 2 areas in particular just take such a beating from all of our sitting, and from a lot of other reasons, but that's one of the biggest factors. So those are the 2 areas that most need stretching to offset a lot of the things that we're doing on a daily basis. So clear as mud? Cool. All right, that was a lot of like stuff. It will actually make sense when we go over here, so I promise. So let's head on right over here now. So no one's gonna break a sweat or do anything crazy. So take your pick, spread it out. Was that? It doesn't. You can move them. It doesn't matter. If you haven't showered in a couple days, you should probably, you know, spread out, give everyone else a little more. So, yeah, just grab that and spread it out. We'll put those in right over here. This is less about the height of the box, and it's about like getting, we'll go to 6-inch or 12-inch box. And then we'll grab some foam rollers too. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off, like I said, we're just going to go through the like passive stretching, active, and then isometric. So when we're looking at the passive stretching, and if you've already had a couple glasses of wine today, or if your balance isn't that great, hey, I'm not judging, but you know, you can grab a foam roller if you need something to balance just a little bit. So what you're going to do is come right up on the box and put this toe straight ahead and this toe straight ahead. So that's one. So again, you have 6-inch box or 12-inch box, it makes no difference. You need it, it's here. So when we're thinking about our hamstring stretch right here, so the leg that's on the ground, point that toe in just a little bit. All right. So one, when you do that, you feel it a little bit more in the back of the leg, maybe. So when you point that in, awesome, sweet. All right, so that worked. I wasn't sure. So so again, when we internally rotate that bottom foot, we should feel a little bit greater stretch on the hamstring. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the opposite shoulder. So if your right foot's on the box, we're going to take our left shoulder and bring it towards our right foot. So you're kind of turning into that front leg and just leaning forward here. So you should feel a little bit of a stretch in the back of the leg. Or a little bit more of a stretch as you lean forward. So, yep, so we're turning into that front leg. You got it. All right, so right here we're doing a passive stretch. As far as the muscles that we're stretching, they're not really, they're stretching, but they're not really doing much else. So what we would do is we're gonna hold this stretch right here. We're gonna pretend it's been about 30 seconds. And then now what you're gonna do is take your heel that's on the box and on a scale of 1 to 10, like a 5. Don't go crazy. All right, on a scale of 1 to 10, like a 5, I want you to take your heel and push it, try to smash it down into that box. Again, don't go crazy. Just look at 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. You should feel those muscles in the back of the leg. You can relax if you want, so that way you're not here all night. But you should, when you press down, did you feel those muscles like start firing? Yeah? All right, sweet. So what that is, that's what I was talking about, that isometric stretching, where we're working to get those muscles stronger. They're in range of motion. Depending on how hard you press down, obviously you can press down more or less just to get a feel for it. But when you do, you can really crank up the intensity pretty quick on that hamstring stretch right there. So on a typical, people always ask, well, how long should I hold each stretch for? And there's some, factors that come into play. But I would say on something like this, what you would want to do is a 30-second stretch, just like, hold that stretch, and then a 30-second press down, and then a 30-second stretch. So something like that would be, hey, 30 seconds of just passively stretching, 30 seconds of isometrically contracting the muscles, and then another 30 seconds of just stretching. What will happen is when you do that, if you do that consistently a couple times a week, this is what happens by incorporating this. You have people that will say, like, I've stretched and stretched for years, nothing's changed, and within about 2 weeks you will notice a difference. But it's because you're kind of training your body that's like, hey, I've got the strength to be in this position, I'm good to go, and again, I'm not going to get hurt. So it's teaching your body that, like, I'm good in this position and I have the strength to do that. So that would be taking, again, just looking at the hamstrings here, that would be doing a passive stretch and then driving the heel down. That would make it more of an isometric stretch. All right, now we're going to go to the mat.
So how do you say 2 weeks or so you know this? How that is it itself? So just like you have one range of motion and reaction.
You should. So like how could you know that you're improving?
Yeah.
So the easiest way you would know would just be you'll notice like your ability, how far you're going down. Like let's just say day 1, okay, I can go here and that's it. By day 7, I should be a little bit further. Day 14,
okay.
yeah. So yeah, this would be something that would slowly improve every couple days. You should be able to get a little bit further. So one other thing you'll notice is kind of also on that question. So when you stretch, you stretch for 30 seconds, and then I'm going to drive my heel down, press for 30 seconds, and then when I stretch for 30 seconds, that last stretch, you should be able to get further right then instantly. So, but as far as it's almost, it would be like if you stretch something out and then overnight it kind of goes back. It's the repetition so you're definitely going to temporarily increase your range of motion right then and there on the spot. But again, that's not what matters. More permanent changes, and that's where you're doing it every day. It will start to become more permanent as your body understands that it's like, hey, I have the strength to be here. Because you're working those muscles isometrically, it'd be just like doing like a flexed arm hang. You're working the muscles isometrically, you're working isometrically. It's the same idea, only a little less miserable than doing a flexed arm hang.
So strength shrinks in it takes a certain amount of piece of that level flexibility, and then once you achieve it, you don't need to stretch this.
I would say, yeah, that is correct. To maintain, yeah, you don't need to do it as often, definitely. How often is often enough? It's going to vary every person. It's going to vary based on, and this is why it can be impossible to give a definitive answer. It's going to be, a lot of it's going to vary based on your lifestyle choices. If you're sitting on a desk for 10, 12 hours a day, you're going to be more likely to fall, trend the other direction a lot quicker versus maybe someone that's like doesn't sit all day. I don't know anyone that doesn't sit all day, but I'm sure that person exists.
Sean, so it has to do really with muscle memory?
No, I wouldn't call it muscle memory because muscle memories.
Well, like my body will go back to its old.
Yeah, I mean, it's more, the changes are just temporary. It's just, as far as the increases in range of motion from, like, if you were to do this right now, you should be more flexible, short term. But by the time you wake up tomorrow, it's gone. So it does take the repetition to increase that range of motion and make it more permanent. It takes it a while to really get it to just stick. So that's why, especially early on, the repetition is just so important in order to see that improvement. But again, I tell people, give it 2 weeks. If you do it for 2 weeks, I've never seen someone not see fairly significant improvements. The problem is most people won't do it for 2 weeks straight. But if you do, like, I've never seen it not lead to pretty significant improvements. And then from there, again, you kind of like, what does it look like to maintain that every other day, maybe? I think that would be a little bit more trial and error based on your lifestyle. We would test it out. Go to 7 days a week, and then once you get to a place that you're happy, maybe come back to 5 days a week and see, all right, I'm still good. And then 4 days a week. And then my gut tells me that for most people it'd be like 3 to 4 pounds every other day. But the cool thing is, if you're focused on like the hips and the shoulders, you're focused on a few of those key areas, and you don't really need to do like 20 different stretches. It's like, all right, if I just do these 3, I'm good. So that would be my suggestion. So we're going to do a couple more examples. Go ahead and grab a mat. If you want to make it more comfortable, you can flip it over so that it's a little bit more cushion. And then we're going to put one knee down on the mat. Doesn't matter which knee. No, this knee. So we'll go one knee down on the mat, and then you're going to put your front foot forward right here. All right, so from this position, you're going to push your hips forward. Now, ideally, when you push forward, this knee should be bent at about 90 degrees. All right, what happens, most people tend to have this foot too far back, and then if your knee's coming forward, like over your toe, not that your knee coming over your toe is bad, it's not, people think it is. It's just, you're just not going to get a stretch. So when you push forward, that, like at the front position, this should be bent about 90 degrees. That's when you know you're set up about where you want to be. All right, so you should feel a little bit of a stretch here. All right, so we're going to kind of do the same thing to show you different areas. So we're stretching this hip out right now. All right, we're going to give it another 10 seconds, give or take. My math's not exact, but so we're stretching this hip out, passively. We're not moving, we're not doing anything to it. So we're passively stretching this hip. Now what we're going to do, again, on a scale of 1 to 10, start easy, go like 5, go a little crazy. I want you to take this knee on the leg that's down, drive it down into the floor. So like push that knee down. When you do that, you should feel the front of the thigh and that glute muscle start like firing a little bit, kind of like the hamstring. So you're pushing, and that's why you want to double up on the mat. So you're pushing the hip forward, we're stretching, and then you can relax if you've been pushing that the whole time. So again, you're pushing that hip forward, stretching through here, you're lengthening those muscles. So I'm doing that for about 30 seconds, and then now I'm going to drive my knee forward. Again, on a scale of 1 to 10, I said a 5. I wouldn't go beyond an 8 ever. It's just no point. And you'll be miserable. So you drive that knee down again. Hip muscles start firing, the glutes start firing. You're going to do that for about 30 seconds. And then when you relax, you'll probably feel that you can go a little further. after doing that. So if you stretch, what's that?
Just right away.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So you stretch for 30 seconds, you drive down for 30 seconds, and then you probably, when you relax the muscles, you should feel almost instantly a difference in this, where it's like, oh, go even further down. Again, just doing that once, tomorrow morning you wake up, you be back to square one. It's because it takes the repetition. So, everyone, give that a shot. So, do you feel different? Do you feel those muscles firing when you push down a little bit? Cool. So, when we think about, so what we're looking at, think about like the hips. I got one more we're going to do for the hips. So, when you think about the hips, so the first thing we did, or this whole joint area, first thing we did was the hamstrings. We kind of looked at the back of the leg. Now we're on the front of the leg. So now what we're going to do is on the inside of the leg, what's called the adductor muscle. So you can go right here, leg out to the side. Doesn't matter which leg, just don't kick anyone. So yeah, leg out to the side there. As far as your foot, forward, flat, side, whatever, really doesn't matter. So on this stretch, what's going to determine the level of intensity it actually is based on this leg right here. So you see how right now this leg is below my hip? All right? If I want to get more stretch out of this, I want this knee outside of this hip. So most people were stretching this side, but the positioning of this leg is actually going to make or break how much you stretch through. So right now, my knee is below here. But if I were to scoot this leg out, I'm going to feel a much greater stretch right here. So if you scoot that knee out a little bit, you probably feel a difference. And then you just want to go through your hands right here. Now, if someone was super flexible, I'm not that guy. But if someone was, you could drop down to your elbows even. So you could either drop down to your elbows, or you could move this knee outside even further to get a better stretch. Again, that leg is out to the side, whether you're on like the side of your foot flat, it doesn't matter. So you should be feeling a little bit of stretch on the inside of that thigh here. So we're going to hold that stretch for 30 seconds, give or take. We've probably already been there. All right, now what you're going to do, and again, foot flat, foot on your side, it's whatever feels comfortable. Everyone's a little bit different. Take that leg, press it down into the floor. Again, on a scale of 1 to 10, like a 5. Yes, the leg that's straight. You're pushing that leg down. Now what's happening is those adductor muscles, the muscles on the inside of the thigh. Man, I can't speak all of a sudden. They're probably firing based on a couple facial expressions. So we're going to do that for 30 seconds. That's fine. Just relax. Except I'm not trying to. I don't need you to be breaking a sweat tonight. But you can at least feel. Hopefully now you can appreciate like what's going on. So again, this is looking at like the isometric stretching and how if this is the type of stuff you should be doing if you're looking to make permanent long-term changes. And again, it's all about getting the muscle stronger at the end range of motion. So we did back of the leg, front of the leg, now the inside of the thigh. So we're going to move into the upper body real quick. But that just I'm working on the hips from 3 different angles. And that's important to note because your hips and your shoulders are both the ball and socket joint. They're meant to move through different ranges, they're meant to move in all different directions. So with our stretching, a common mistake would be most people tend to focus on always stretching their hamstrings or always stretching always doing this stretch, always doing 1 or 2 stretches. When in reality, like I said, because they're ball and socket joints, they're meant to move in different directions. You need to stretch those joints in different directions, whether it's like the adductor muscle, the leg out the side, or like more the front of the thigh, like here, or the hamstring, which is the standing one we did. So again, a couple different examples there. So, question?
I just think that you do like this kind of same philosophy if you have a back injury to like for me every time I work out these muscles fast. Is that something I can do some sort of like this every day to strengthen that?
Yeah, so with your, so looking at, and this kind of gets to, there's no like, oh, this stretching's bad, this is good. It's just, the answer is always, it depends. Depends on the situation. Good example, you're moving helping your kid move college dorm room, and moving a bunch of boxes, and at the end of the day, your back's just killing you. In that type of setting, those muscles are generally just they've been overworked. They're just like all knotted up and tense. So in that type of situation, doing more passive stretching, which is trying to get the body in more of a parasympathetic or relaxed state, that's going to be super effective. So if your muscles are super tense from a hard day of moving stuff around, doing the isometric stretching is probably not the best time to do it. It's like your muscles are already like all knotted up and tense, and it's like at that point in time, you need to relax. Instead of just trying to get everything to calm down. So does that answer your question a little bit? But yeah, you can definitely do it. And I think the isometric stretching, though, generally in strengthening those muscles, yeah, absolutely would help out. It's because the body is just a series of joints stacked on top of one another. So most of the time, a problem, like a back problem, isn't it's oftentimes not the problem is not the back. The problem is the joint above and below the back. So it's kind of like why a lot of physical therapists will say like the hips are a bad neighbor. If your hips aren't functioning properly, it generally stems to either back pain or knee pain. So the problem is not the back of the knees a lot. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's the joint above and below not doing its job. And therefore then the back's having to overwork to compensate for the hips not doing what they're supposed to do. So, all right, moving to the upper body here, we're going to start, now this would be, we're going to here start with just an active stretch, just so you can kind of see the difference. Again, now we're just looking at so you can see different types of stretches here. So what you're going to do here for an active stretch, you're going to have, you're down on all fours, you're going to take your hand, and it's like I'm sliding it over as far as I can go, and then my eyes are going to follow my hand, and I'm coming up towards the ceiling as far as I can. Hold it for about 3 to 4 seconds. Yep. And then go back underneath. So you're reaching over as far as you can. Your eyes should always follow your hand. And then you want to reach up. When you reach up, the arm that's on the ground, make sure you keep that elbow straight. A lot of people have a tendency to want to start to bend that elbow. You don't want to do that. So your eyes are following your hand. All right, so go ahead and do that one more time. So this time what you want to think about the back of your shoulder. So you're like, that's what you're trying to open up. All right, so I'm trying to open up through the shoulder. I'm not just like reaching. So I'm trying to open up. That's why you want the eyes to follow the hand. I want to open up right here. This is one of the best things you can do if you're trying to drive a golf ball further.
So John, when I point this way,
Yep.
this arm is staying straight
Correct.
as well? Okay.
Yep. And then the eyes follow the hand back up. Like I said, think about trying to open that shoulder up, not just reach. Now, if you start doing some, and this applies to all these stretches, but this is one that people commonly notice. If you feel one side is much better than the other, don't be alarmed. That's very common. Hopefully over time that would, work itself out and even out a little bit more. But that's really common for that to be the case. So, all right, everyone's going to grab a foam roller here. So, should have a foam roller in the general vicinity. Kelly's got a couple more. 2 more. Thank you. All right. So, we're going to look at one more upper body stretch. Now going back to that like passive and isometric. So passively, what we're going to do, and I'll just use this. So if you're doing this at home, arm on a recliner, couch, chair, counter, like got a million options. I'm going to put my hands on here, and drop my hips back and tuck my head in between my shoulders. All right, now when I do that,
This one's got issues.
oh, I've seen better days. When I do that, I'm dropping my hips back, but I'm pushing my arms away from me. All right, the reason you're doing that is because you're trying to lengthen these lat muscles here. So I'm dropping my hips back, but then I'm reaching in front of me. And what that's causing is these lat muscles, which are these large muscle in your upper back, you're kind of then pulling from both directions. So you're going to lengthen those muscles out. So if you're just holding it right here, this is a passive stretch. I'm just holding it. Nothing's really going on. So again, let's just say we hold that for 30 seconds. And then at the 30-second mark, I want you to take your palms and press them down into that roller. Pretend that roller is a beer can and you're trying to smash the can. Or single can, whatever floats your boat. So, so what happens is, again, scale 1 to 10, just like a 5. Don't go, you don't have to go crazy here. And then relax and try to go back to that stretch. See if you can stretch down a little bit further. You might feel that your range of motion, you can tuck your head down a little bit further. So again, you stretch and then you press down for 30 seconds, give or take, and then you stretch again. So on that second stretch, like I said, you should feel like you can get just a smidge further. Now, tomorrow again, we'll be back to square one, but by doing something like this every day, you'll see a pretty significant improvement. So again, when we think about like our 3 types of stretching, we've got passive stretching. All right, passive stretching, no movement, muscles are relaxed. All right, passive stretching is great for times where you're in a like fight or flight state. Like you need to relax, you need to calm down. Your muscles are all tight because of whatever you were doing. With driving range and your back's tight from that and moving boxes. So things are all knotted up. Again, that's where the passive stretching really comes into play. So it's going to help to get everything. Again, you want everything to calm down. So that's when the passive stretching is really beneficial. Active stretching, I think of that as more like for warming up for movement. We've been laying in bed for maybe 8 hours. Most of us, not 8 hours. So I'll take 6. So on a good day. So the active stretching though is really good to get warmed up before a workout. Or if you think about when you've been laying in bed not moving all day, like things just start to stiffen up. So that active stretching is also great, like first thing in the morning, just to get your body moving, get the blood flowing. So if you wake up in the morning and you're like, man, and you just like, if in the mornings you just like you're moving around a little bit slower, that's where that active stretching can really be beneficial. And again, I don't want to spend too much time tonight, but I'll email you tomorrow with a whole list of different examples. There's videos that show you exactly what to do. And then the isometric stretching is more important, and again, this is the thing that most people neglect. This is where, if you're wanting to make permanent improvements, if you want to, 1, reduce the chance of injury, and 2, make permanent improvements in your the quality of your movement, this is where the magic happens. It's that isometric stretching, and that's going to have a big impact. Like I said, passive stretching, relax, or if you're stressed, that's when you're trying to calm down. Active stretching before you work out, or just to get moving if you've been sitting on it. If you sit behind the desk for 10 hours at work all day, I would say, set an alarm on your phone and every 90 minutes, get up and do an active stretch or 2. Just to get things moving, because you don't want to sit still too long. And then isometric stretching, like I said, that's where we're going to see more permanent changes. And that's what you want to do if you're wanting to move better for many years to come. You're not showing the video, Kelly. So, questions? Anything?
Any, like, as it relates to breathing while you're stretching,